Hi, this is Dan Whitney with the Whitney Law Firm in Towson, Maryland. Today I'm going to talk about the issue of Maryland being a two-party consent state and what that means in the context of when you need consent to record somebody. I've done my research and it appears that only 11 states in the United States require two-party consent. So the question is, what does two-party consent mean? What it means is that you need the other person's consent if you're going to record them. In the other 39 states with one-party consent, that means only one party needs to consent to the recording, which means essentially you can secretly record anybody else. So fortunately, Maryland is a two-party consent state, and that has a number of implications. How does that arise in my practice? It comes up in a lot of cases, or a fair amount, I should say, because it's not uncommon for a client to retain us, and then we're discussing the case and discussing, okay, what was the interaction with the car dealer or your landlord or the security guard that stopped you and accused you of stealing, or any of the other things that often crosses the desk. What happens is someone will say, oh, well, hey, they called me this, or they told me this, or they accused me of this, or they represented that, and I have the recording. They didn't know I was recording them, and I got them, and it's right here. I say, okay, stop. That's not going to be helpful. It was, 1, recorded without permission. 2, we cannot use it because it's not admissible in state court as evidence. 3, you've just committed a felony. And 4, if they find out, you may be on the hook for civil damages. So it's safe to say we're not going to use that. And honestly, I don't even want to know what's on it because it's fruit of the poisonous tree, as they say. A lot of people don't realize that, or they think they can, well, I recorded somebody and that I've got away with it. They didn't know, we can use it against them. No, you can't use it against them. And all it does is cause problems. Now, the test for whether or not something is a secret recording or consent is required to record something, the test is there a reasonable expectation of privacy? Of course, as a lawyer and as anybody else, you have to say to yourself, well, what does that mean? What does a reasonable expectation of privacy mean? What it means is that you reasonably believe you're going to have a private conversation with somebody. So what are some examples of that where you would have to get two-party or all-party consent to record the conversation? 1, a conversation on the phone. If I'm speaking with a client and we're both talking, that's a private conversation. It's also protected by attorney-client privilege, but it's even if we weren't, I was just talking to a friend or my spouse or somebody else, that's a private conversation. Now, the question comes up, what if somebody is in a different state that's not a two-party consent state, but they call into Maryland to speak with me where it is a two-party consent? Guess what? Maryland law protects Maryland residents, and in this situation, the two-party consent rule applies because you're calling into the state of Maryland, so you would have to disclose and get my consent to record me. And this has actually happened a number of times to me personally where it'll come to my attention something's being recorded. In one example, I was speaking with a potential client about a potential matter, and they were actually out of state in the Midwest somewhere. And we're talking about the case, and some car dealer ripped them off, and so we're going through that. And then I heard, beep, this call is being recorded. I said, whoa. What is that? And the potential client said, oh, I'm just recording the call. Do you mind? I said, yes, I mind. You're not allowed to do that in Maryland without my consent. Maryland's a two-party consent state. And I don't consent to having my phone call recorded. Well, why not? Because I don't have to, and I don't want to record it. And he said, okay, well, I'll turn it off. Then I heard, beep, your call is no longer being recorded. But you have to think to yourself, how many times with the various apps and technology and AI and this and that with the phone systems, how often are calls being recorded? And there's really no way to know. I think it happens a lot more surreptitiously than people realize. And if you ever do find out that your phone call was recorded in a two-party or all-party consent state without your permission, you have legal claims for, 1, just a statutory violation, like in Maryland, the penalty, the civil penalty, not the criminal penalty, but the civil penalty, if you are found to have violated the Wiretap Act, is the greater of $100 per occasion or $1,000, so essentially $1,000 minimum, or actual damages if your damages are greater arising out of you being secretly recorded, plus punitive damages, plus attorney's fees. So essentially the way I interpret the statute is a minimum of $1,000, potentially punitive damages, and your attorney would be able to recover reasonable attorney's fees if you're able to prove your case. Now, that was one example of when that situation happened to me. And another example, we had filed a lawsuit against the defendant. It was a property management company, and the defendant was upset about something and called my office and wanted to talk to me about it. And I was not interested in engaging with them about the conversation. And I essentially was telling them, no, you need to speak to your own attorney. This is not a conversation I can have with you. They said, well, I've actually recorded the conversation. So I said, okay, well, that's illegal. You didn't have my consent. You've now committed a crime. And in that sort of scenario where you want to make a record of somebody having done something in case you need to use it later, what I did is I immediately emailed that person. I had their address from the case and I said, this confirms. We just had a conversation. You told me you had been recording me. I did not consent. And I'm telling you to preserve that recording for litigation purposes in case I didn't say this in the email, but in case I decide to press charges, in case I decide to bring a civil claim, whatever it is. But you want to create a record when you catch somebody illegally recording you. So if it comes to pass 6 months or a year or 2 years down the road, there should be a situation where you need to use that. Well, it's not just you saying, hey, 2 years ago they did it. No, you have essentially a contemporaneous writing, creating a record that, hey, this just happened and I'm saying it happened. So keep that in mind if this situation should happen to you. So what are some of the other scenarios in which recordings occur? Not just in our private lives, speaking with friends or family, but also in the workplace. In the workplace, this actually happens quite a bit. There's instances that have come to light where a manager will call an employee in, especially if it's somebody who's working on the phones, dealing with customers all day, and say, hey, I heard how you spoke to Mr. Smith. That is not the way you're supposed to handle a sales call or a service call or whatever. And then the employee thinks about it. I say, wait a sec. How do you know what I said? Why am I being recorded? Nobody told me I was being recorded. I didn't agree to this. And then they search online and they will find an attorney. Then they realize, hey, my privacy's been invaded. It's a two-party consent state like Maryland. The wiretapping statute has been violated, and I now have rights and can bring a claim for statutory damages and any other actual damages, potentially punitive damages and fees, depending on the facts of the scenario. So just because you're in a workplace doesn't mean you give up your rights. Now, if this is a fact-specific scenario and analysis of what exactly is a reasonable expectation of privacy. If you're shouting at a coworker in a cafeteria or a storage room and people can hear you through the walls, that's not a reasonable expectation of privacy. Let's say you're FaceTiming with somebody and they happen to be recording you, or somebody else is recording you, perhaps not the person you're talking to, but somebody else is recording the other person's phone. That's a violation. You have a reasonable expectation of privacy if you're both in a private place that this is going to be kept to yourself. That could certainly be a potential violation. Really, especially in this day and age of all the technology and everybody has phones that record everything. And recently I read about a little AI device that, for whatever the reason, if you want to walk around and have your entire life recorded all the time, I guess you just wear it like a necklace or stick it in a pocket or whatever. It records everything that you say, everything that you hear, which one, I just think that's a bad idea in general. But two, if you're not telling everybody that you're around, by the way, you're being recorded, I think you could rack up quite a few felonies in just a short amount of time, not to mention all the civil penalties. So probably not a great idea to do that in two-party consent state. But I hope this has been informative. If you should find that you were recorded without your consent in Maryland, please feel free to give my office a call. Thanks for watching. Take care.